Wendy McWilliam. I'm Lucia's main supervisor here at Lincoln University in the School of Landscape Architecture. So just before we begin, I just want to welcome a few special guests. We have Martin Witt and Claire King from the New Zealand Cancer Society, and from the city of Christchurch, Kelly Hansen and Toby Chapman, and from Otago University, Bronwyn McNoe. So thank you very much for listening in today. We're really looking forward to hearing your comments or questions or feedback from the presentation. I'd also just like to thank them very much for the funding and the support that they are providing to this very important research. So I'd like to introduce Lucia Caves, who is an excellent student. She has a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture from Lincoln, graduated a few years ago. Since then, she has also achieved a certificate in Parks and Recreation and Tourism, and has been practicing landscape architecture, and has now decided to come back and achieve her master's. The master's is a one-year program, so it's not a long time to do research. So the learning curve for Lucia has been pretty steep, but we're very proud of the progress she's made. Today, she's going to be presenting her proposal. It's not set in stone. It's not finalized yet. So the idea for this presentation is to kind of bring you up to date as to what Lucia is thinking of in terms of how to approach this research, and to get any feedback on it, so that we can make it as best, do the research as best we can in order to answer the questions with confidence. Okay, so without further ado, Lucia, you can take it away. It'll be about half an hour, I think, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and discussion. So as Lucy is speaking, if you've got any questions or points you want to make, please note them down, and then and be ready to discuss following the presentation. Okay, Lucia, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm stoked to say there's actually quite a few more people here than what I thought, and I think I see a few of my old fellow students from Lincoln Uni too, so that'll be interesting. Before I get started, yes, I'd like to thank Wendy and Andreas, my supervisors, and also my advisor, Anu Priya, who is a PhD candidate at Lincoln University. Those three have provided me with a lot of insights over the, I guess, 3 months now of learning curve that it has been, which has brought me to my presentation today. So before I get started, I'd just like to quickly outline a few of the topics I'll be addressing. So first up, I'll be looking at the problem, then identifying some solutions alongside the gaps in the research that I know of. Followed by that, I'll then address my research proposal, my proposed method, and the implications for my research. After that, as Wendy has mentioned earlier, I'm really keen to open up the floor to get some questions and comments from those who have any, to help me form my proposal further. So what is the problem? Well, the problem basically starts off with the sun. And the sun creates ultraviolet radiation, which comes in the form of direct and indirect UVR. Direct UVR is most damaging in summer when UVR levels are at their peak. So this is, for example, when you experience sunburn. Direct UVR overexposure builds over time and causes skin cancers and eye cataracts. Aotearoa has one of the highest rates of skin cancer globally, with 2,500 people diagnosed with melanoma annually. Additionally, Aotearoa is situated in quite a unique place. So we're quite an isolated country with relatively unpolluted air. This means that our UV levels are actually higher than, for example, Europe and North America. Additionally, international studies have raised concerns about shade protection measures in parks, and this especially relates to areas of higher deprivation. So what we know about the solution is that primary prevention is generally the best method to address UVR consequences. So these mitigations revolve around adopting policies and environmental strategies, which follows through into site design, which relates to landscape architecture. UVR protection and design takes the form of natural shade, such as vegetation, and also built shade, which is man-made structures purposely created for shade. What we know about the research so far is that there is inequities do exist in park provision between neighbourhoods of high and low deprivation globally. And also what we do know is that there are very limited studies that reveal similar inequities in shade provision. And in New Zealand, there do exist studies that have addressed park shade in Aotearoa and have shown it to be slightly deficient. But to my knowledge, no studies address the equitable provision of shade in Aotearoa to date. So my research questions revolve around equity and provision of shade. So the first one is to determine whether or not shade is equitably provided between neighbourhoods of high and low deprivation in New Zealand. The second one is to assess whether parks actually provide adequate shade to protect people from UVR exposure. These questions have formulated the 4 following objectives to help me answer these. The first one is to describe the theory and practice of UVR protection in parks. Secondly, I need to assess the quantity and the quality of shade provision within selected parks. After that, I'll need to evaluate whether the shade is equitably provided and that there is adequate shade provided in parks. And finally, I need to discuss the implications for planning and design of parks towards improving direct UVR protection. So Christchurch City is my case study area. This city was selected as a case study due to concerns raised by the Cancer Society regarding the level of shade protection in Christchurch's parks. So this map outlines Christchurch City and its deprivation and the deprivation index of its suburbs. So the darker the purple colour, the more deprived the area is, and the lighter the blue equals lower deprivation. Sorry. Additionally, the red shaded suburbs show the highest, the suburbs with the highest levels of deprivation, and the blue shaded suburbs show the suburbs with the lowest levels of deprivation in Christchurch. So this brings me to my parks selection criteria. So how I will be selecting parks is through the presence of a play feature in the area, such as a playground, as this generally determines, or it has an influence, on younger users who are more vulnerable to UVR overexposure. Additionally, I'll be looking at accessibility within the deprivation area. I haven't quite addressed this yet, but I'm planning to establish about a 500-metre accessibility perimeter around each park to determine that it sits within the deprivation index. Now, I am aware the Christchurch City Council Open Spaces strategy does suggest an 8.5-minute walk for older and younger people, which equates to about a 400-metre radius. But I have seen other studies that go for about a 1 kilometre radius, and just given the size of the city suburbs, at this point I'm thinking of a 500-metre perimeter would be suitable. So on this map you can see the proposed study neighbourhoods and the Christchurch Park Cities Networks map. They're just the green shaded areas. The table in the corner of the screen also highlights the parks located in the high deprivation areas and the low deprivation areas. As you'll see from the numbers, I have so far 45 parks in total. 29 parks are in the low area of low deprivation, and 16 parks in the areas of high deprivation. So once I've established my park study size, I need to address how I will measure the shade. So how I will do this is to measure the quantity. So this will help me determine how much shade there is in the park. I propose to use this scale, which goes from 1 to 20% of minimal shade to 100%, which is complete shade. In addition to this, I plan to address the quality of the shade as well. This relates to how protective the shade will be in the park. This scale I've found in Greenwood that I guess goes through light, medium and heavy shade. But I believe for my research, I will need a bit more of a refined scale. So I propose the following amendments to assess my shade quality. This involves heavy, medium, light, and very light shade. From my research, I would assume that the heavy and the medium shades would be sufficient for UVR protection. So how I propose to also collect my data is conduct the shade audit. So first up, we'll look at 3D SketchUp modelling to assess the quantity of shade in a park. And the process of 3D modelling is that I can create the model and then assess the shade irrespective of seasonal conditions or the weather patterns. And it's not restricted by a particular day or time, as I can just adjust that in the model after I've geolocated it. After I've done that, I'll need to look at the quality of the shade. The best way I can find to do that is by undertaking a visual shade audit. This, however, is reliant on season and the seasonal patterns. This is also restricted to the day or the time the site is visited. However, it seems to be a great cost-effective way to check the viability of both the 3D modelling and double-check the conditions on site. So when I get my parks, once I've gone on site, I decided to divide them into activity areas, as this has been successful in past studies addressing shade. I propose to use the following a version of the following table to divide my parks up into activity spaces so that I can work out the coverage of each respective area. However, when I'm on site, I do realise that some of these activity areas, especially the ones outlined in this table, may not be completely relevant to the Christchurch City Parks context, so I might need to revise these as I work through the fieldwork. So the data analysis will cover some inventory, which will include assessing the shade quantity, as I've mentioned before. So at the moment, I'm proposing to model each park and take 2 measurements per site at 11 AM and 2 PM, either during spring equinox or summer solstice. I haven't quite refined that one yet. The reason I'm deciding to take 2 measurements per site just between the peak times of UV is to get a full idea of where the sun's angles will hit the site and when the most effective coverage will be. In addition to this, to address the shade quality, I'll be undertaking the site audits from September through to October, or when the trees are in full leaf, because this is generally when direct UVR is higher. And we'll be able to see the full shade patterns. After this, the research questions will be answered using descriptive statistics. This will be aimed to measure the average cover and density of shade by an activity area. Linear regression will be considered as an alternative option if descriptive statistics aren't working. So finally, the implications for my research. These will hopefully fall under the protection, where I can determine the shade quantity, quality, and identify key improvement areas by activity area, by park, and per deprivation score for Christchurch. Secondly, this will highlight any disparities between suburbs of high and low deprivation. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Lucia. So that was very efficiently done, way on